Imagine plunging into the seas of the Ordovician more than 470 million years ago. The world you know does not exist yet. No dinosaurs roam the land, no mammals cry out, no birds fill the skies. Instead, life thrives beneath the waves, and the oceans are ruled by strange alien creatures. Among them, one predator towers above the rest: Cameroceras, the giant shelled squid. Stretching up to 30 feet long, Cameroceras was unlike anything alive today. Its massive conical shell, shaped like a torpedo, gave it both armor and stability as it patrolled the deep. From the front of that shell emerged a cluster of long, powerful tentacles, arms designed to seize, crush, and drag struggling prey back toward a beak strong enough to slice through flesh and shell alike. For trilobites, early fish, and any unfortunate swimmer of the Ordovician seas, Cameroceras was a living nightmare. But this was not just a mindless killer. It was a glimpse into the rise of cephalopods, the lineage that would one day give us squids, cuttlefish, and the mighty octopus. Cameroceras was both a pioneer and a terror, a hunter that showed how intelligence and adaptability could dominate ancient oceans. So how did this shelled squid conquer its world? What secrets lay within its torpedo-like body? And what can it teach us about survival in Earth's earliest seas? Let's dive deep into the ancient waters and uncover the story of Cameroceras, the giant shelled predator that once ruled the Ordovician seas. The Ordovician seas were unlike any oceans we know today. They teemed with strange creatures, most of them armored, crawling or drifting in the currents. Trilobites scuttled across the seafloor. Schools of jawless fish swam in swarms, and early corals built the first reefs. But above all, a silent hunter lurked, moving with patience and precision. That hunter was Cameroceras. This giant cephalopod stretched longer than a bus, its massive conical shell tapering into the distance. Unlike the soft-bodied squids we know now, Cameroceras carried its fortress everywhere, a hard, tapering chamber that both protected and anchored it in the waters. Emerging from the wide-open end were its most formidable weapons, a crown of tentacles capable of sudden and deadly strikes. With a burst of jet propulsion, Cameroceras could glide forward, driven by water expelled through a siphon under its shell. This movement was not fast compared to modern squid, but in the still seas of its time, it was enough to close the gap on prey. And once close, escape was nearly impossible. Tentacles wrapped around trilobites, cephalopods, and early fish, their struggles only tightening the predator's grip. The beak of Cameroceras was a cruel tool, capable of cracking through shells that offered little defense. Prey dragged into its grasp rarely stood a chance. Flesh was torn apart, soft tissues devoured, and fragments of exoskeleton scattered to the seafloor. Each kill fueled its massive body, keeping the predator at the very top of its food chain. But this ancient squid was more than just a killer. Cameroceras represented the first great rise of cephalopods, a dynasty of hunters that would continue to evolve for hundreds of millions of years. From these shelled giants would one day come the squids, cuttlefish, and octopuses that still dominate oceans today. Its presence marked the beginning of intelligence in the sea, the spark of a hunting strategy built not only on strength but on calculation. Even in its dominance, Cameroceras lived in a world of constant change. The Ordovician seas shifted with new species, reefs expanded, and competitors appeared. Yet for millions of years, this torpedo-shaped monster reigned unchallenged, striking terror into every creature that crossed its path. To encounter Cameroceras was to face one of the first true apex predators of Earth's oceans. Cameroceras drifted silently through the currents, a shadow that stretched across the water like a living torpedo. Light from the surface barely reached its depths, turning the seas into a dim blue realm where sight was limited and instinct ruled. Here, its long tentacles felt for movement, sensing vibrations in the water before striking with sudden force. Anything caught in its reach was dragged inexorably back toward the crushing beak. Trilobites that clung to the seafloor had little defense. Their segmented shells offered protection against smaller predators, but Cameroceras was built to overcome such obstacles. Its beak sliced through armor with the efficiency of shears, snapping bodies in half before pulling them apart piece by piece. Early fish fared no better, their soft bodies shredded in seconds once the tentacles had coiled around them. For creatures of the Ordovician, survival meant avoiding the gaze of the giant squid. Some evolved faster swimming abilities, others sought shelter within reefs or burrows. But Cameroceras was persistent, and its size alone made it nearly impossible to challenge. It could linger above the seabed like a looming tower, waiting until prey revealed itself, then surging forward with calculated bursts of energy. Its hunting strategy revealed something deeper about its kind. Cephalopods were not merely brute predators. They were thinkers, experimenters, creatures that learned and adapted. Cameroceras embodied the first stage of this long evolutionary path. While its shell limited speed and agility, it compensated with power, patience, and precision. In many ways, it was a prototype for the squids and octopuses that would later refine these traits into perfection. As the ages unfolded, Cameroceras ruled unchallenged. It patrolled waters that stretched across the ancient supercontinent of Gondwana, haunting shallow seas and deeper basins alike. Wherever it went, silence fell, for the other creatures of the Ordovician recognized the presence of their executioner. In those vast and alien waters, Cameroceras was king. The shadow of Cameroceras stretched far across the Ordovician seafloor, its shell glinting faintly in the filtered light above. This conical fortress was more than protection. It was also a weapon of intimidation. Smaller cephalopods scattered at its approach, and swarms of fish broke apart as though a storm had passed through them. Cameroceras did not need speed to inspire fear. Its very presence reshaped the rhythm of the ecosystem. When it struck, the ocean erupted into chaos. Tentacles lashed out, curling around prey with a strength that left no room for escape. The water churned with silt and fragments of shell as trilobites were torn from the ground and early fish were yanked from the safety of their schools. In seconds, silence returned, broken only by the soundless tearing of flesh within the predator's grasp. Its beak, hidden within the massive arms, was a masterpiece of evolution. Harder than bone, sharper than stone, it sliced cleanly through anything Cameroceras captured. Each bite was followed by a powerful pull deeper into the shell's cavity, where the remains of prey were processed and consumed. This efficient machinery of hunting ensured Cameroceras could sustain its massive bulk, feeding on a steady supply of victims. And yet, despite its dominance, Cameroceras existed in a fragile balance. The Ordovician seas were crowded with life, and while no predator could rival its size, shifts in climate and ocean chemistry constantly reshaped its world. Reefs grew and collapsed, sea levels rose and fell, and new species emerged to challenge the old. Cameroceras thrived because it could adapt, not by abandoning its armored shell, but by refining its hunting techniques and exploiting every opportunity. In these vast seas, Cameroceras was both conqueror and symbol. It represented the first great experiment in oceanic dominance, a creature that demonstrated how intelligence, power, and patience could turn the tides of survival. Long before the age of dinosaurs, long before whales claimed the title of ocean giants, Cameroceras ruled an alien world beneath the waves. Cameroceras moved with a strange grace, its massive form gliding through the dim Ordovician waters. Though its body was confined within a rigid shell, its tentacles made up for this lack of agility. Each arm was lined with suckers or gripping pads, capable of detecting the faintest chemical signals in the water. To its prey, these tentacles seemed to appear out of nowhere, wrapping tightly and dragging them into the predator's waiting beak. The environment around Cameroceras was bursting with life. Coral reefs, still primitive, began forming the first true marine habitats, sheltering countless smaller animals. Crinoids swayed in the currents like underwater forests. filtering plankton from the water. Among these delicate structures, small fish darted nervously, always aware that somewhere in the gloom, the giant squid was hunting. For them, the shadow of Cameroceras meant instant death. When hunting, Cameroceras relied on patience more than speed. It often hovered silently above the seabed, letting currents bring potential prey closer. A trilobite wandering too far from its group could find itself ensnared in a sudden strike. An early fish distracted by feeding on plankton might feel the sudden tightening grip of a tentacle before being swallowed whole. Its victims rarely saw the attack coming. Each successful hunt reinforced Cameroceras' dominance over its ecosystem. Few creatures could grow so large without being challenged, but this predator thrived because no rival yet existed at its scale. It was not just another predator, it was the first oceanic supergiant, a creature that turned the Ordovician seas into a stage of relentless survival where size and power dictated fate. And still, even in its supremacy, Cameroceras lived under the laws of nature. Growth demanded constant feeding, and competition, though small, was ever present. Other cephalopods nipped at the scraps, scavengers waited for leftovers, and smaller predators tested their luck along the edges of its hunting grounds. The ocean was rich, but survival always came at a price. The seas of the Ordovician pulsed with life, yet wherever Cameroceras roamed, silence followed. Its immense shell drifted forward like a submarine from another world, casting a shadow that unsettled everything in its path. Smaller cephalopods froze, trilobites scattered, and jawless fish wheeled away in sudden panic. The predator needed no display of violence to command fear. Its reputation was carved into the instincts of every creature that shared its waters. When the hunt began, the calm broke into fury. A school of early fish, clustered tightly for safety, found themselves engulfed by the looming shell. Tentacles lashed outward, striking faster than their primitive eyes could track. One by one, unlucky swimmers were seized, their bodies writhing helplessly as they were dragged toward the beak. The water filled with the faint shimmer of scales and the drifting fragments of broken bone, evidence of a kill too swift for most to witness. On the seafloor, trilobites crept between crinoid stalks and reef crevices, hoping their armor would protect them. Cameroceras knew better. Its tentacles probed into tight spaces, pulling its victims free. The sharp beak cracked through their shells as though they were no more than brittle twigs. Each crunch was a reminder that in this ocean, evolution's first great defense had already met its match. Though immense, Cameroceras was never clumsy. It adjusted its movements with subtle precision, conserving energy in an environment where every effort counted. Unlike predators that relied on bursts of speed, Cameroceras dominated by patience, stealth, and timing. Its intelligence shone through in the way it selected prey, choosing moments when escape was least possible. This was not mindless feeding. It was calculated, an early sign of the clever lineage cephalopods would later become. And as it fed, the Ordovician seas echoed with a silent truth. Power shaped survival, but cunning secured dominion. Cameroceras possessed both, and for millions of years, it reigned as the first true monarch of the oceans. Cameroceras hovered near the reef edge, its body half hidden by curtains of drifting plankton. To the smaller creatures below, the water seemed calm, but the predator was calculating every movement. A cluster of trilobites scuttled across the sand, unaware of the silent giant looming above. Then, with a sudden pulse from its siphon, Cameroceras surged forward. Tentacles shot down like whips, curling around one, then two, then three of the armored insects, hauling them upward in a cloud of disturbed silt. The beak closed with terrible force. The crunch of exoskeleton reverberated through the water as fragments fell to the seafloor, already attracting scavengers. Small worms and arthropods rushed in to feast on what Cameroceras discarded. Nothing was wasted. The ecosystem revolved around the predator's leftovers, a cycle of death that fed countless smaller lives. At times, Cameroceras rose toward the shallows, its shell gleaming faintly in shafts of sunlight that pierced the surface. Early fish darted like silver sparks through the beams of light, but their speed was nothing against the patience of the giant. It would wait, hovering with motionless precision, then unleash its strike when the school drifted too close. The sea exploded in panic, yet always a victim was caught, dragged into the dark beneath its shell. Other cephalopods, smaller and quicker, followed Cameroceras at a distance. They learned from its hunts, taking scraps, imitating its techniques. Evolution was at work in these waters. Intelligence was spreading, shaping lineages that would one day abandon the heavy shell for speed and flexibility. Cameroceras remained the giant of its age, but in its shadow, new hunters were already preparing to take the stage. For now, the ocean belonged to it alone. Every creature felt the ripple of its presence. The Ordovician seas were vast, but wherever Cameroceras drifted, fear ruled first, and silence followed. Cameroceras glided deeper into the basin, where light faded into a dim twilight. Here, the waters were colder, the currents slower, and the prey less abundant. Yet this realm offered opportunities as well. Creatures that sought refuge in the gloom, sluggish trilobites, blind worms, and armored nautiloids, were easier to surprise. Cameroceras drifted silently among them, a torpedo-shaped ghost, blending into the darkness until the sudden flash of its tentacles shattered the calm. The strike was efficient, almost mechanical. Tentacles wrapped around a smaller cephalopod, its shell no defense against the crushing grip. The victim thrashed, but the predator's hold only tightened, dragging it back toward the beak. One sharp snap, and the body went limp, its soft insides consumed while the shell drifted away like discarded debris. This was the fate of countless creatures, repeated endlessly, fueling the life of the giant hunter. Yet for all its dominance, Cameroceras lived under constant demands. Its size required enormous amounts of food, and each hunt had to succeed. Hunger drove it forward, forcing it to patrol vast stretches of ocean. Failure meant weakness, and even the mighty could not endure long without sustenance. The Ordovician seas were generous, but even their richness had limits. Around Cameroceras, life adapted to its presence. Some trilobites grew flatter, hugging closer to the seafloor to avoid its reach. Early fish formed tighter schools, relying on numbers to confuse the predator. These strategies rarely saved them, but they marked the beginning of an evolutionary arms race, a cycle where prey and predator pushed each other into new forms. Cameroceras stood at the center of this cycle, shaping life simply by existing. And still it roamed, year after year, generation after generation, leaving behind a legacy not in bones, but in the survival strategies of everything it touched. Its reign was not just about feeding, it was about rewriting the rules of the sea. The giant shell drifted slowly above the seabed, its tapered form stabilizing every movement like the keel of a ship. Inside, Cameroceras maintained perfect buoyancy by adjusting chambers with gases and fluids, a mastery of physics long before humans would understand it. This control allowed the predator to hover in silence, watching, waiting, conserving energy until the right moment arrived. Beneath its looming shadow, the Ordovician ecosystem pulsed with constant activity. Crinoids raised their arms to filter drifting plankton. Small arthropods busied themselves in the sand, and jawless fish swirled in tight schools. None of them could ignore the presence above. Instinct made them scatter, yet scattering often revealed the weak or the slow, and those were the first to be claimed by Cameroceras. When it struck, the attack was both brutal and precise. A pulse of water from the siphon propelled its shell forward. Tentacles flared open like a deadly crown, and prey was seized before it could react. Victims were hauled upward, crushed by muscle, and dragged toward the beak. The silence that followed was almost eerie, broken only by the drifting remains settling into the sediment below. The impact of Cameroceras reached beyond the kill. Scavengers followed it constantly, feeding on scraps, thriving on fragments of shell and flesh. Even reefs benefited, as nutrients from its hunts enriched the waters. In this way, the predator shaped not only fear, but life itself, its presence rippling outward through every layer of the ecosystem. Still, it was not immortal. Every hunt carried risk. Every day demanded energy. A missed strike could mean wasted effort, and hunger pressed always at the edge of survival. Yet for millions of years, Cameroceras endured, its dominance unshaken, its name written into the deep history of the oceans as the first true monarch of the seas. Cameroceras drifted through the shallows where sunlight danced across the waves, turning the water into streaks of gold and green. Its shell shimmered faintly, a reminder that even in beauty there was danger. Schools of early fish clustered together, flashing like silver ribbons, but the predator's patience was endless. It hovered without a sound, waiting for the moment when the swarm faltered. One sudden pulse, a surge forward, and tentacles shot out. Panic erupted, the school scattered, and one unlucky fish was pulled into the dark embrace of the beak. Along the seabed, trilobites clung to the sand, hoping to escape notice. Some burrowed shallow pits hiding beneath the grains, but the tentacles of Cameroceras were relentless. They swept the bottom like searching fingers, prying prey from their shelters. A crunch followed, quick and merciless, as the predator claimed another meal. The remains fell as broken shells, already attracting scavengers eager to feast on what little was left behind. Other cephalopods lurked nearby, smaller cousins watching the hunt unfold. They lingered at a safe distance, gathering scraps and learning strategies. Evolution was unfolding in their bodies, inspired by the success of the giant. Over countless generations, these creatures would adapt, abandon the heavy shell, and become faster, more cunning hunters. But for now, Cameroceras was their master, the model of power they could only imitate. The Ordovician seas were not empty of threats, but few dared to challenge the giant squid. Its size alone discouraged confrontation, and its strength ended any conflict quickly. Yet even Cameroceras was bound by time. Climate shifts loomed on the horizon, sea levels rising and falling, ecosystems changing in ways no predator could control. Still, as long as it rained, the oceans bent to its will, each hunt carving its presence deeper into the story of life. Cameroceras sensed its world through water itself. Pressure changes rolled across its skin like whispers, and faint chemical traces painted trails that tentacles could read. Sight helped in the bright shallows, but in deeper water, it hunted by feeling. The tremor of fins, the scrape of trilobite legs, the swirl of silt after a careless movement. Each cue was a signal to prepare, to coil its arms, to time the strike so perfectly that escape never began. Its shell was a marvel of living architecture. Chamber after chamber trailed behind the body, each adjusted with gases and fluids through a narrow tube that threaded the length like a lifeline. With this control, Cameroceras tuned buoyancy the way a musician tunes strings, rising or sinking with deliberate ease. Stability came from mass, precision from the siphon, and power from the arms. Together they made a hunter that ruled by control rather than speed. Growth was a promise that had to be paid in food. As juveniles added chambers, they stepped up the food chain, shifting from tiny crustaceans to larger prey. The sea made room for them at every size. Small nautiloids patrolled reef edges, mid-sized hunters roamed sandy flats, and full giants haunted the basins where few competitors dared to follow. Each stage wore the same design in a different scale, a repeating answer to the question of survival. On some days the ocean roared with storms above, and waves pounded the shallows into chaos. Cameroceras slipped seaward, letting depth swallow the violence. There, in twilight calm, it found stragglers shaken from reefs and schools broken by the surge. The giant did not fight the sea. It used the sea's moods as a part of its strategy, taking what tempests dislodged and turning disorder into effortless meals. Even the silent hours mattered. Between hunts, it hovered and watched, conserving energy the way a glacier stores cold. Scavengers traced its path like shadows, rising whenever fragments drifted down. Worms threaded the sediment where shells fell, and tiny arthropods multiplied on the nutrients it released. A single kill fed a web of lives, and in that web, Cameroceras was both fear and foundation. Occasionally another large nautiloid crossed its path, a rare meeting between monarchs. There was no ritual battle, no reckless clash of shells. A slow appraisal, a slight change of depth, a measured drift apart. Dominance in this world was proven by endurance, not spectacle. The ocean was vast enough for rulers who understood distance, and wiser still for those who wasted nothing. Seasons turned in rhythms the land had not yet learned to keep. Plankton blooms brightened whole provinces. Fish swarms thickened. Trilobites migrated like living currents. Cameroceras followed the abundance, mapping routes older than continents, returning year after year to basins that never failed. Its memory was written in the body, chambers added, muscles strengthened, instincts sharpened by success. When darkness finally fell and the sea quieted to a slow drift, the giant settled above the sand, shell angled to the current, tentacles gently uncurled. Somewhere beyond the dim, a ripple betrayed movement. Muscles coiled, siphon primed, patience hardened into intent. In a world before thunder lizards and leviathan whales, the first word of power belonged to a hunter with a living fortress, and the ocean listened. As the Ordovician seas rolled through millennia, Cameroceras remained an enduring figure of dominance. Its kind had no need for drama or spectacle. Survival itself was the greatest performance. Each chamber added to its shell was another page in the silent story of evolution, a record of growth that carried it from fragile hatchling to ocean monarch. But nothing in nature is eternal. Slowly, the world began to change. New predators emerged, more agile and swifter, able to outmaneuver the heavy shell. Ecosystems shifted, climates altered, and the vast balance of life adjusted once more. Cameroceras, once unchallenged, now stood as a relic of its own time, an apex built for a stage that would not last forever. Yet its shadow never truly vanished. The cephalopods that followed, ammonites, squids, cuttlefish, octopuses, carried its blueprint forward. The intelligence, the precision, the patient hunting strategies all traced back to these armored giants of the Ordovician. Each modern squid that hovers in the dark, each octopus that slips silently into a crevice, echoes a pattern first written by Cameroceras. When we imagine monsters of the deep, we often think of sharks, whales, or creatures that roam our oceans today. But before them, before the age of reptiles, before the rise of mammals, the seas belonged to a torpedo-shaped hunter with a fortress on its back. Cameroceras was more than just an ancient squid. It was proof that long before the familiar giants of prehistory, evolution had already experimented with power, intelligence, and fear. And so the story ends where it began, in the vast Ordovician seas, a place of silence, of drifting shadows, of life both fragile and unrelenting. In those waters, Cameroceras carved its reign, and though the tides of time washed it away, the echo of its presence lingers. The first monarch of the deep may be gone, but the ocean still remembers the giant-shelled predator that once ruled the seas. And if you've enjoyed this journey back to the Ordovician seas, don't let it end here. The story of Cameroceras is just one chapter in the epic saga of prehistoric life. Countless other giants, hunters, and survivors wait to be rediscovered, each with secrets that shaped the world we know today. So if you want to keep exploring the mysteries of ancient creatures and the behaviors that define them, make sure to like this video, share it with fellow explorers, and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next dive into the forgotten oceans of time. From trilobites to titan predators, every story brings us closer to understanding the first rulers of Earth. Stay curious, stay adventurous, and join us again when we uncover the next ancient beast.